Welcome to Strategies for Showing Faculty Presence in your class. I'm Greg Kaminski with Online Learning, and my teaching area is ESOL, and I also teach a Reading 115 class, a hybrid. Also, we have Stacie Williams with us today. So Stacie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stacie Williams, and I teach in Communication Studies out of the Rock Creek campus, now the Zoom campus.
Okay, and Rod.
Rod Hathaway. I'm with the Trades and Apprentice Program.
I'm Rod Lee. I'm the Physical Sciences Department Chair here at Slovenia, and I also teach Physics and Astronomy and work with the OL mentors.
Thank you. And Peter.
Hi, Peter Seaman. I work for online learning at PCC, and I've been doing online learning since the 90s.
Thanks very much. So we will get started, and Peter's going to kick this off with goals and some information for us.
Thanks, Greg. So here are a couple of reasons why you should care about taking something away from the workshop that we're doing here today. We're interested, first of all, in listing some reasons why faculty presence is important when you're teaching with online tools. Now, I realize that today, I think we've got a mix of folks here who have taught online already, who have been through the OIO, the Online Instructor Orientation, and have some experience teaching online at PCC and also teaching online other places. And of course, now this term, we've all been thrown into the situation where even if you weren't doing anything online before, now you're doing things online and you're doing a lot on. And faculty presence comes up for us. So a second goal for today is to look at some examples of ways that experienced instructors promote their online presence. And then finally, we can look at some best practices. So I wanted just to introduce this concept here, a concept that I call set it and forget it. So some of you might have seen this infomercial. When I was a kid growing up in the, 1950s or whenever it was, 1970s, there was this infomercial that was on TV, and it was this guy that you can see in this picture here, Ron Popeil. He was first of all famous for the Veg-O-Matic. He was an inventor, but most of all, he was a salesman, and he loved to sell his products on TV with these infomercials. So what you're looking at here in this picture is an example of the Ronco Showtime Rotisserie and Barbecue. And so Ron's big thing was that his sales line, his tagline was, set it and forget it. Okay, so the reason I wanted just to bring this up is that for those of us who do a lot of online teaching, there's a real temptation to set up your learning activities in an LMS or in a platform somewhere, and then kind of forget it. Hope that your online quizzes are going to run, that the assignments will be in there and the students will be completing them. If you have readings or videos that the students can watch, you can hope that students will be watching those and reading those things. So really, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of why we should care about faculty presence, right? This is kind of a little intro to this, to the next part where my learned colleagues will talk about what they actually do to show faculty presence. But I wanted just to make a few points here about why we should all care about it. I talked before about the temptation to set it and forget it. And I think that that's a temptation that we should all try to resist, because it's too tempting to do that. It's like with a lot of technology, right? Like when you're driving your car, if you have cruise control, you have a temptation sometimes to set the cruise control, use the technology to do the work for you, and then kind of not think about things anymore when you're driving. And obviously that's a big no-no when you're driving. I want to make another point here about how online tools and online experiences are not supposed to be like a correspondence course. We probably have all heard of correspondence courses. Those were prevalent many years ago. And the idea was that you could complete a learning experience via correspondence, where you would do something, like if you're the student, you do something and you mail it in, and then an instructor would read it and maybe make comments on it and then mail it back to you. It turns out actually that correspondence courses are not the same as online courses. They don't qualify as online courses because of this point here in number 3, something known as regular and substantive interaction. So there's actually, I think, a federal law that's related to financial aid, which says that an online course has to have regular and substantive interaction. Now this term, and it's kind of a complicated topic, which I won't really go into, but this is something that people who teach online courses think about or should think about, because there is a requirement to have regular and substantive interaction with your students in an online course. So then, final point I'll make here just quickly, I like to think a little bit about what the instructor's role is in mediating the learning challenge, and think a little bit about what value we add. And I always like to ask the question, is teaching more like presenting, or is it more like coaching? And I think that I really come down on the side of coaching. I think a lot of us do, right? That what we're trying to do when we're teaching is to mold behaviors in our students that we would like our students to be able to present in the world. My final slide, which is just maybe to propose a couple of ways in which the instructor adds value in the learning experience. And I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, and I can think of, well, I can think of many more, but I think these three are the most important ones for me. That instructors provide support for learning, especially in that we give students guidance. We want to guide them in ways that are more productive rather than less productive, right? And then a second thing that I know a lot of us think about is holding students accountable for learning, right? Which we mostly do via assessing them. And I already saw a couple of good questions on the Google Doc about, how you do that when you're kind of in this online environment. And then the third area of impact that I think is most important, and I think it's really kind of under appreciated a lot of times, is motivating, and how we motivate our students to do the work, which isn't easy, right? Learning is not easy. It requires, changes in our brain and changes in our behaviors. And so how we do that. So I would just conclude my little portion here by saying that I think that faculty presence online environment should do all of these three things to have an impact on the students and their learning experience. And I think the best instructors provide these values or add these types of values for students. And I think it all starts with really being present in the online class and in the online environment where we're all living and teaching now.
Great. Thank you, Peter. That's a great introduction to what we're doing. Stacie.
Great. So I'm going to basically take you on a screenshot tour of a few things in my class. One of the things I didn't put up on here as a strategy, though, is phones. And I will say, just as an add-on here to all of this, that phone calls can be a really great opportunity to check in with students who maybe have been ghosting you via email. I have found that doing a quick 2 or 3 minute phone call with a student can clarify things like a student saying, oh man, I thought I dropped that class. I'm not even taking classes this term anymore. And so I'm able to walk them through withdrawing from the course, some of those types of things. So we do have access to student phone numbers. I've never had a student be mad that I called them. Usually people say, thank you so much for reaching out to me. My tip with that, since we're all working from home, is you can dial *67 before you dial a student's phone number, and that'll block out your cell phone number so that they don't have your personal number. And that's, you can do things like get a Google phone number and stuff like that also, but that's a pretty easy trick that can work. I will say, don't leave voicemails with identifying information about the student, like, hi Stacie, I see that you haven't been participating in your online class and I'm checking in with you about that. That would be a FERPA thing. So I would just say, hi, I'm Stacie calling from PCC. I wanted to check in with you. Could you give me a phone call back if you are going to leave a voicemail? So that's just a tip with that. So anyhow, I'm going to take you through a few things that I do in my course. And the big thing that I want you to think about as you look through some things is to consider what your teaching personality is. I think it's important that we consider how some of the ways that we teach and the presence that we bring in the classroom, how we could describe that to somebody else, and then think about ways we could move some of that into an online or remote modality. As we know, there are challenges with things being just text-based, and sometimes our personality and our care and concern can get lost in that. So I'm going to take you through a few different sections of my course. So one of my favorite things is creating ad hoc videos, and I call them ad hoc because they're things that I have primarily created just for that one course. And I know you're thinking, Stacie, that sounds like a lot of work for every single term to create brand new videos, but these are 3-minute, 4-minute videos tops, sometimes even shorter. And the goal is to really communicate something that I might communicate in writing, but to students in a way that my verbal and nonverbal presence shows up. Because I teach in communication studies, of course, I was going to bring in some research from the National Communication Association. And what I have found through some research is that really it's our verbal and nonverbal communication actions. So that's our voice, our facial expressions, gestures that we might use. All of that has really positive impacts between students and faculty, and can even create a greater sense of closeness and reduce some of the psychological distance between us. One of the disadvantages of remote classes is the screen seems to act as a type of psychologically distancing thing. I'm here in my dining room and you're all out somewhere else. And if I was just reading something, I might feel very isolated. You can insert a video note plenty of places all over your class. And this is a demo. You can come back to these slides later to watch it. But this is a demo of how I, or even a student, could use video note in the course. Basically, any part of the course that has this HTML editing box, which includes grading feedback, will allow you to turn on your webcam and create a short video note. There is the option to add auto captions. We know those aren't 100%, but that is an option. And so short video notes you can post in announcements, you can post in grading feedback, you can post in discussions. And what it does is it allows your presence and who you are more as a person, not just words on a screen, to show up in the course. So this video is just a way to walk you through some of that. And I'll be talking about some places where I use video note and where I also encourage students to use video note, especially in things like introductory discussions. So that I think is a really important thing. I'll say I started using video note to give more feedback throughout the term last quarter, and I actually had students send me emails thanking me for the feedback that I gave them, which is weird. I've written really beautiful, what I thought it was beautiful feedback in the past that was very detailed, and no student ever sent me an email saying, wow, that was great feedback, thank you. So I'll just say from the experience using a lot more video, it's been really helpful. And you know what, if my dog, whose nails are way too long right now because they haven't been clipped, is walking around and it sounds all clicky on the floor, I just laugh it off and go, hey, there goes Rudy again, and then keep giving my feedback. So they don't have to be polished and perfect, and I actually think it's better if they're not. What I do for weekly announcements, you can see an example video from a couple quarters ago in one of my courses. There's a link here if you want to come back to the slides at some point and have a look at that. So you'll have an example. So announcements are a great place to give information, but again, because our classes are really text heavy, consider using images or video clips or GIFs, like something to catch attention, but also consider what your personality is. For me, I like to leave what I call little Easter eggs in the course occasionally. So you'll see that underneath this picture, the final countdown, I say something like, you can see it in all of its glory here, and it actually links students out to the music video for the final countdown. It's little things like that where students know that it's me and not just some generic course that's been created, like that's me and my personality. And my course has little links to pictures from my dog here and there, other things as well, but are just sort of the little Easter eggs they can find. And again, you can use video note in announcements to share what's going on that week. And on the last slide, I had an example of how I do that, so you can see that on your own time. So I would say discussions, see them also, especially given COVID-19 isolation right now, see discussions as an opportunity for more than academic learning and sharing. This quarter, I opened up a discussion that I call the coffee shop, and I put a little icon there, and it's just a place for people to share things that don't really relate to the course. Today, actually, I was feeling a little bit of wanderlust, so I posted some photos from a trip that I took recently with a little encouraging note. You'll notice there's some blue text there that actually links them out to a song on YouTube that kind of fits with the theme that I have here called Strange Trails. So I've had students posting in here this term, which is really great. One of my students even recorded a quick little uplifting video on her guitar that she posted in the coffee shop. So it can be a way to build community and have those side conversations we might have on our 10-minute breaks in class or before or after class. And so it's a great way to show up in the class. The other thing I'll say for discussions, it's a really great idea to try to keep track of students that you respond to, and even keeping track of other information from folks in the class can be great because I can weave that into replies that I make in the discussion if I know what their interests are or what they're studying. And so I use a spreadsheet to keep track of that. And the reason is I want to make sure that I spread my comments out across the quarter. We can sometimes be drawn to some of the same students we've had good conversations with, but I want faculty presence to be something that all students experience. And I find it's easier for me if I keep track of that. And it just makes sure that I sufficiently show up. So a spreadsheet may seem impersonal, but it's actually a way to make sure that I have a good bird's eye view of who I've been connecting with. All right, the other thing I like to do is use little digital badges, and I use these in both public facing and private facing places. So these are some clips from discussion forums that I've been in my business communication class. And this isn't necessarily deep substantive feedback. These are just some quick comments I gave celebrating people for an outstanding discussion post or an outstanding peer reply. And I'll also put these in the grading feedback because I can embed an image into the rich text editor for grading feedback. So you can either do this in a public facing way or in the feedback. If you are curious about badges and where to find them, these are just little images. I made these ones in PowerPoint because I'm really good at making little images in PowerPoint. And then I just saved it as a JPEG that I could insert, cropped it down and everything. Or there's a free open source website called the Noun Project that I really like. And those are CC by little icons that people design. And you could use some of those as inspiration for how to visually design your badges. So that can be a great way to celebrate in a visual way work that people are doing, but also maybe help students be a little competitive. And then the last thing that I like to do is give grading feedback. Think about that as faculty presence. My #1 favorite thing is the day after an assignment is due to put a 0 in the gradebook and then follow up with some helpful information. That way students know that I've been present in the class. And so here's an example of some feedback that I might give. And it's a great way to let students know I see what's going on pretty regularly in the course and that I'm here to help them. So that's another thing you can do in the grading feedback to make sure that you're showing up in a lot of places in the course.
All right, thank you very much, Stacie. So Rod, go ahead.
Hi there, everyone. One thing I just wanted to say right off the bat that really surprised me, and this kind of followed up on Stacie's comment, was how grateful the students seemed that we were even willing to teach remotely. There was a lot of that in the first couple of classes, and it was really nice to hear and kind of, good feedback. Most of this stuff applies to all fields. There's a few things here that sort of are unique to science, but every night before we meet as a class, I send out an email to check in with students to see if there's questions they might have that I can address in the next day's meeting. And then I also provide them with opportunities afterwards. And while I'm doing this, you can solve the problem to the right. No, I'm just kidding. I also have a terrible sense of humor. I also make use of all sorts of modes of communication, like Greg took a poll in the beginning. My heaviest ones, I would say, are email, discussion boards. We have an online homework system, so all of the physics homework is done online, and students can actually send me questions right from part of a problem. So they can say, hey, I'm on part B of problem 7, and I'm stuck in this very specific situation. Can you help me? Which is a lot better than saying, I'm really lost in this class and I have no idea what to do, which all of us know we get that comment sometimes. One thing I've learned, I've been teaching about 21 years now between high school and college, and it never fails to repeatedly mention resources you have for the class. I've had students that have made it out to like week 7 or 8 and all of a sudden just realize that there's an online homework system. And that's really tragic. And so try to avoid that kind of thing by reaching out to people that I don't see completing assignments. So the next one's kind of similar. Reach out to ghost or underperforming students online. Early, with an encouraging attitude. So, you know, hey, I've seen you miss these assignments. Let's get together. Let's talk about a way to get you back on track. You know, what kind of resources do you need? Things like that. I've found students are really positively responding when I do this kind of thing. I've heard that from a lot of other people too. We have a general Q&A question board where students can post all sorts of things from questions and problems. I actually encourage them to find videos that do a good job explaining physics concepts. I mean, some of this stuff is like vector calculus, you know, involved, and lots of math, and it's sometimes easier to watch, you know, a video somebody's found on YouTube that explains it really well. And then I'll link that to my course shell in the weekly module for that material. I also have a lot of one-on-one meetings with students. I have various appointment slots, and I encourage them to fill those in. And the problem that you see on the right is an example of this. So I have an iPad, which I share the screen with them, and we can actually work through problems together, just like they're in my office or my classroom. And so that's been an extremely useful tool. And then when I'm done, I can upload those to a folder where students can access them online. I also teach astronomy. So that's actually my background is in astronomy and cosmology and physics. And so in astronomy, we have this fun thing called the Astronomy Picture of the Day, the APOD, and it goes all the way back to 1995. And I'm realizing that many of my students, most of my students are born after 1995 or thereabouts. So a lot of times they'll go back and choose their birthday, or they'll choose some day that was special to them, or some image that they really identify with. And I have them post it, tell us what it is, why they chose it, and sort of why we should care about it. And then have other students reply to those images, and then I try to get in there as well. And you know, I mean, space is just cool. You know, I'm sitting in a nebula right now, not a real one, but in case you're wondering. But it's a lot of fun to do these APODs. And then we have specific discussion groups each week in the astronomy classes, which I know a lot of online classes do. We talk about things like dark matter and dark energy, and the birth, evolution, fate of the universe. And students are pretty engaged in these. Just have to set really specific expectations of what we expect to see in the discussion. And you can track who's responding. And again, if I find people aren't responding, you know, through the first discussion, I'll try to send them a note and say, hey, you know, there's this discussion going on. We'd love to have your input, you know, and it's part of the grade, but that's a little motivation. And then I've done this a couple of times with classes where I've solicited feedback from them rather than waiting for the course eval to come. And especially this term, it's been really helpful to see what is working for students and what is not working for students. And I've been really surprised because I spend 4 hours a week online with them, working through problems and doing all sorts of things. That's my regular class time. And I've asked a couple of times with, you know, is this useful to you? Do students, you know, seem to like it? And they're like, yeah, we love it. And we like it how you upload your lecture notes afterwards and all of that other stuff. So yeah, I'm looking at the questions. I do this during class too. You can do it with other tablets, not just iPads. You can share all sorts of screens. So this is one of my favorite little activities, at least it's become this quarter, because we don't have labs. And not having labs in science has been a real struggle. And luckily our SAC, our Subject Area Committee for Physics, we've all been writing a few labs for a few different courses and kind of taking over a few, you know, each of us taking a couple of them. But this PhET program, it's on this PhET website, which stands for Physics Education Technology. they have all these really neat simulations where you can go in and build circuits and try out different electrical components and measure voltages and currents. And so we do these during class sometimes. And then we also do them for the labs. These simulations work great during what would normally be called lecture, where I can have students try to build things and ask them questions like, what do you think will happen if we add a second battery? Or what do you think will happen if we cross a wire in a strange manner? And then I wait to see that they've come up with an answer, and then we construct it and build it and see what happens. Electricity is just one part of the course, but I figured this was a fairly visual example of the kinds of things that I've been doing in class. And once again, I just write down again, I notice students aren't doing the labs. I try to contact them quickly. This material, frankly, is hard to learn in person, let alone online or remote. And so I always tell them, you know, I've been extra encouraging this term. I've been saying, you know, you're really great people for sticking with this. You're doing well. You know, we can give you all the help that you need if you're, you know, if you have the attitude to succeed in the class and make it through. And I think most people, given that kind of help and motivation, do pretty, you know, they make it through the class. I have a lab instructor who this term is sitting in on the lab class sessions. And so he kind of watches the message board and will flag messages that he thinks I should pay attention to. Not that they're not all important, but some of them are very relevant to what we're talking about and might be misconceptions that students have. So I've tried really hard to make this remote class more user-friendly and student-centered. Instead of doing like 2 heavy midterms, I did 5 mini midterms and I dropped one. We've taken on a little different attitude with the remote class, trying to make it work better for people's schedules that right now can be changing fairly quickly. If you ever want to check out any of these physics demos because you love physics or you just love learning, vet.colorado.edu has biology, chemistry, math, earth science, physics simulations, and they've upgraded all of theirs most of theirs from Flash to HTML5 now. So that's my show.
Thank you. So strategies for clear communication. So you want to put these things in your syllabus. So make it clear for students how to contact you and the expected response time. You know, might not be right away, maybe, but within 24 hours. Any policy for weekend communication that you have, if you plan to communicate on weekend or just not be available, just make it clear. And then invite questions. So make them feel welcome to contact you. You want to encourage students not to become isolated then. And there's just an example of what I put in my syllabus, which I will not read through. That's in our template, but I'd be happy to share that with you later. Zoom, as you know, is a good way to contact students. So many of you are already meeting your students in the classes each week. That's a great idea. Also for office hours, so one-on-one meetings. And I use a sign-up sheet using a Google Doc for sign-up. And I ask students to meet me at least once during the term, just so that they know that I'm approachable and that they have the option to do that. And they're a little hesitant to do that. They're a little shy about doing that, but after they get into it and we tried once, it works pretty well and they feel much more comfortable about that in the future. Like Stacie, I like to include a video or an image with announcements then, so welcome them each week, brief intro. Sometimes there's a reason to include a video, something about the class. Often it's a screen class, something about the calendar or an assignment that you're doing. Sometimes not, sometimes just an image if you don't need to do that. Or it could be a picture of you talking, but at least include an image so they gives them a clue to something new is there for the week. Yeah, and then you want to personalize the feedback. So as Stacie was saying earlier, so that's going to show your presence. Make it early enough for students to correct misunderstandings about what they're doing, about the content, and to deepen their comprehension while the course is still in progress. So you don't want to wait too long into the term for that to get going. So give them feedback early on, give it to them frequently, and also make it customized. So specific, customized to the student individual needs, so they know where they're being successful and where they need to improve. And there are some possible tools for the feedback. So we've discussed a number of them today, but the Q&A forum, I like to have that in the class on the home page. Discussions, video, audio, text comments in response to assignments, email, quizzes, online room through Zoom. VoiceThread is another one. And intelligent agent. So that's a feature inside of D2L. It's a little bit more complicated. If you're interested in that, that's something that can automate your responses to students. For example, if they get below a certain score on a quiz, or maybe if they miss more than 5 days without logging into the D2L, to the class, that can alert you automatically to send them a message. So that's what an intelligent agent is. And if you're interested in that, you can work with one of the ITS. They'd be happy to help you with that. And finally, VoiceThread, I mentioned that. So that's a tool for interaction, for feedback. So students can respond with video, audio, or just text. And there's an example where I'm responding with video. So it's something that can increase your presence with the students as well. So much more visual than just a text discussion then. So VoiceThread, that's available right from inside of your D2L shell as well. Okay, so we had planned to do a breakout activity. So I'm going to send you out to a room just for 5 minutes. Think about your own teaching personality and what ways of showing faculty presence would work best for you in the class. So just talk about that with your colleagues for a few minutes, and then we'll bring you back to the main room to wrap up. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Anyone like to share anything that you discussed in the breakout room?
Hi, this is Nermeen. Yeah, I was chatting with Carolyn. I teach physics. She teaches math, and James, I think he teaches some medical course. So anyway, so the one thing that we notice is that you don't get much interaction. So so how do you know that students are still with you in the classroom? Even if you ask questions, you always get response from the same students all over again. So I think one idea is to use the breakout rooms to make students get together and discuss together. Also the idea of scheduling one-on-one with students. This is also another idea, so to get to know your students. So I guess I will try to use that. I teach physics lab, so perhaps during the lab, like we used to do in a face-to-face class, we used to split the class into groups to work together. So perhaps I will try that also in the online class.
Yeah, that can be very helpful, right? You can also give them an occasional poll. So you use the polling tool for that, or an outside polling tool, or an occasional quiz of some sort to try to engage them. So yes, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. So I have a question. How do you schedule the one-on-one? Maybe I can talk to you offline or send you an email.
Yeah, let's do that offline, so you can do that with for example, within a Google Doc. That's one of the simplest ways to do it. So give your students access to a Google Doc. Daryl's asked about optimal size for a breakout room. Yeah, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 people. Stacie, you think?
Yeah, typically 4 or 5 students is a good size for that. You don't want it so small that just 1 or 2 people dominate.
So we collected some questions at the beginning, and Stacie has been busy working on some answers to those questions already. So Stacie, do you have any comments you'd like to share about this?
Yeah, so I tried to give a couple of suggestions based just quickly on my initial reaction to some of the questions. And one thing that I will say is all the disciplines at PCC have an online faculty mentor, and even if you're not teaching a fully online class, these are folks you can connect with for some strategies, just problem solving some of the things that we've brought up and that you've all talked about in your breakout rooms today. So I liked the question that was like, what about faculty presence? Our time is our present to you, and genuinely all of us who do this online faculty mentor work do it because we really love working with faculty. It's kind of like having office hours when nobody shows up. You're like, all right, well, I was available, but gosh, it would have been great to chat with somebody. So reach out to those. We'll include a link to where you can find your online faculty mentor on the last slide. A lot of questions came in about like audio feedback or some other grading feedback. And I would say go back to the slide I had about ad hoc video, where I do a quick walkthrough of how you can insert a video note. And you actually can do that video note anywhere that has the HTML editing function for insert media. And that includes grading feedback that is given one-on-one to students. The last question, how do you balance grading and giving feedback for so many classes? One of the things you can consider doing, and I've taught online for quite a while, so I do this, I keep a running Google document of common instructive comments. So I have an assignment where I ask students to compare and contrast something called the self-serving bias with fundamental attribution error. That's a content thing where I often type the same clarification. So I just keep a little bit of language about that in a Google Doc handy. So the quarter, next quarter when I go in, I can share that within a comment or two specifically related to their assignment. So not every part of all the feedback needs to be generated each time. And there is a general feedback column where in the gradebook where you can make some grading feedback available to everybody. And that could be a way to share some general comments and then keep specific comments for some students. And anybody who has questions about managing grading and giving feedback like that, I'd be happy to talk to somebody offline because I have a few other suggestions for that. I do want to do a shout out. I know some people were saying participation in Zoom and some of that. We did a session last week. I don't know, all the weeks run together now. We did a session at one point in time talking about strategies for engaging students in Zoom, and I included a link to the document we had with some suggestions, and that might be helpful to you. Those are kind of the main things. Again, you can come back to the slides and look at some of the responses that I put in here to the questions that you had.
And finally, to wrap up, we have 3 slides at the end here. So one is a collection of other resources that Stacie mentioned. So a lot of articles, journals of interest. The next one is tools. So links to tutorials, videos about the tools that are being used. So you'll have access to that as well.
And I'll say I added a link about the intelligent agents, since there was a question in the chat about that. So that's a D2L video that teaches you about intelligent agents. And then the other thing that came up in the chat was the Google appointment slots. So both of those are added to answer those chat questions.
Great. So the tools are there. Support information. So all of our information, all of our contact information, feel free to contact us if you have questions. If you do need some one-on-one support, feel free to contact me. Also, the ITS are a specialist at this. And so Casey Twining, Melanie Budeman, Andre Temkin, and Michael Moss. So reach out to them, and there's their website. There's a link to the workshop schedule and the recordings. And a final note, one does not simply put content online and call it a class. So show your faculty presence, make it interactive. Thank you for coming today. So we'll hang around if you have questions.